Okay, dear colleagues, let's get started, and let me introduce our first speaker for the series of workshops. And this is Nataliia Gunina, a freelance teacher from Moscow, and she will be giving a workshop on etymology in the classroom, a friend or a foe. How much should students know about words? Nataliia, you are welcome.
Thanks, Sue. I hope you can see me, not only horizontally, but also vertically, right? Okay, so yeah, how much should students know about words? That's a question, and it's going to be really about etymology. Well, I'd like to start by asking a question, naive yet complicated. Okay, so я включила его. Да, я сбоку его включила. Горит. Не работает. Okay. Thank you. So, what happens in our brain when we try to retrieve a word from memory, or when we recognize a word when we see it in writing or when we hear it? So, of course, we have our storage of words in the brain, which is called mental lexicon, and it's a huge network full of connections. So, that's an example how words may be connected by association or semantic or maybe phonetic proximity. And actually, I think that you would agree, all we do while we are learning a language and while we are teaching a language is establishing connections and helping students to form connections. So we teach them a lot of things: collocations and colligations, grammar patterns, synonyms. It's all about establishing connections. So, for example, we tell them and we teach them that we can say heavy rain, but not strong rain, that part and parcel always come in this order, but it's never parcel and part, that suggest is followed by a gerund, never by an infinitive, or, for example, 5 synonyms of the word important. It's all important, so not to use the synonyms. However, so we ask them to do something like that, to draw mind maps, or this. Match the words to their definitions, synonyms, or that, find the odd words out. But how often do we ask our students to do something like this? To draw spidergrams, which show words' morphological, etymological, and derivational roots. Like here, from the word sign, which we have some very close relatives and very distant ones, like designate, assignment, or insignificant. I think that for most students, for many students, these are unrelated words that just happen to have SIGN in the middle for some reason, no explanation. So should we ask them to find explanations? Should we help them? Should we offer some explanations to them? Well, I would like to get back to the concept of mental lexicon, which is a storage of words. There are different theories which explain how actually words are stored or arranged in our brain. There is no unanimous concept of that, but I like some theories. For example, those which say that we may store not individual words, but morphemes and affixes. So roots and affixes, plus some morphological rules which govern the combination of those affixes and roots in words. Or maybe we store words in clusters where there is the root in the middle and all its derivatives. There are experiments in which subjects are asked to recognize a word, actually to recognize a sequence of letters or a sequence of sounds when they look at the screen or just listen to something. And the time which is needed for word recognition is measured. And then the subjects are primed with words which may sound similarly, in a similar way, or which just resemble actual words, familiar words. Sometimes they are primed with morphologically related words. Like here, when they are primed with, for example, happy, they recognize happiness or unhappy slightly faster, slightly sooner. That's obvious, no surprise here, because of course, everyone knows that happy and unhappy are related. But what is more astonishing is that, for example, even bound roots may be associated in native speakers' minds. Of course, no native speaker, unless they are linguists or etymologists, will connect words like permit, submit, admit, or omit. They just happen to have this mit element in them, which is actually from mittere in Latin, meaning to send. But when primed with submit, they can recognize admit slightly easier, slightly sooner, which may suggest that even such words, which we are not consciously aware of as being related, our brain perceives as somehow related. So my own interest in etymology started from necessity and perplexity, two things. I've taught adults for a long time, many adults, professionals. So their backgrounds are far from linguistics or etymology or philology, but they are well-educated, well-read people, so I may rely on their background knowledge of things. And I know that very often they don't draw these connections. But in Russian, we always deal with words which are morphologically motivated. So we can see the relationship between the components and structural pattern of a word and its meaning. Like here, maybe we don't think about that, but if we give these words some thought, then we can say that преступление is, for example, stepping across, crossing the line, or поступок is stepping forward. So we recognize that. However, when we start learning a foreign language, our students, we ourselves as learners, and we are learners, of course, and we are as teachers know that our students find themselves in the dense forest of non-motivation, words which are not motivated. And I've been asked about the meanings of words like total, cooperative, unthinkable, even revolution, believe me. So people look at that, what does it mean? Okay, I was shocked. Then I said to myself, okay, some people can't draw conclusions, can't draw those connections, but maybe they can be helped. Okay, there are students who do that perfectly well. For example, if they know something about physics, they may know that these are resistor, or if they are from the field of medicine, they have heard about resistentность. So for them, resist is quite transparent. But even talented students may find it difficult to draw connections between discourage and обескуражить, though these words are etymologically and semantically close. And I'm sure that nobody can see the connection between courage, heart, and courage. So today, I just like to show you what I actually do in my classes, one-to-one classes with adults, professionals, as I said, and students, of course, too, and how I incorporate etymology, etymological research in my classes, which we do together with our students, or I guide them, of course. So it may have a lot of benefits. How can etymology help? That's what I actually want to prove today. So it illuminates the meaning, makes it transparent, relates new words to familiar ones. So they study groups of words, clusters of individual ones. It may explain polysemy, which is sometimes very puzzling words like charge or match. Why does it have slight different meanings? It may improve spelling in some cases. It can make students aware of some derivational patterns, and it reinforces connections with Russian language 1 or other languages if they know, especially of course if they learn or know languages based on Latin, and it's just fun. That's maybe the most important component, and I'd like you to believe me. I'll try to prove that. Okay. So we'll start with this example. Some students confuse these words. Of course, they are very different words like expect and accept, but they consist of same letters, just in a slightly different order. And they may misread them, misspell them, and that affects understanding, reading comprehension quite often. So what can we do? How to help them to differentiate the words? So we look at the first element, which is X, of course, and it's familiar, it's easy, like an ex-wife, ex-president, in words like exhale, extend, expire, and many, many others. And it means out, outside, from. Again, I think more or less it's clear to everyone. It's similar to Russian prefixes is, we. But what about pact in expect? It's actually spect, so S is missing, and this search for missing letters may be also very exciting. So it's the same root as we find as spectacle, spectrum, spectacular, inspect. So it's all related to looking or observing, right? So then we can, or I do that, ask students to imagine something like this. A sailor in the middle of the ocean, looking into the spyglass, peering into the distance and hoping to see some land, an island maybe. So in this way, the word gets a clear, vivid image. So expect is actually to look forward, to look out of the present and into the future and predict it. It's a very simple example. Accept is a more complicated thing. So we have sept, and it is the same sept as, for example, in accept. So we just replace X with another element, AC, which is not a prefix in modern English, though etymologically it is. As you can see, it comes from Latin ad, which is the ancestor of the modern preposition at, and it actually means that. So to, towards, near, at, similar to our prefixes pri, or maybe our preposition к, по направлению, при, около, and so on. So what is the idea? We find it in a lot of other words, and you can see that even the spelling pattern is similar. The double consonant after A in so many words like accommodate, according, account, also addict, you name them. So it means that here we have a etymological or morphological theme. So that's a place where the prefix and the root meet. So what is the idea? Is it about something far or something close? Something apart or something together? Will you help me? What do you think? Far, apart, or close, or together? Together. Of course, it's togetherness, it's proximity, which you know, of course. So when we accept things, we just take them close to us, so to say, close to heart. And when we accept them, we say no to them. That's not difficult, right? But what, for example, if your student is quite advanced, maybe a C1 student who has to learn the idiom like this. These days, girls take exception to sexist jokes. Why is it exception, not objection, actually? They object to sexist jokes. They resent sexist jokes. What's the connection? So it's quite difficult to figure it out, especially maybe the preposition to seems illogical, right? But a little story may help. We've seen that in movies a lot of times, lawyers yelling, objection, your honor, right? But if we go back in time, maybe as long ago as the Roman Empire, there, lawyers used to yell exception, meaning that a certain question, an improper question, or a certain decision should be accepted from the trial. Yeah?
Можете, чтобы не слышать, если хотите.
The origin of the idiom. And again, it makes it just transparent and I think easier to remember, after which, of course, we need a lot of practice, a lot of examples. Yeah, that's obvious. But the root itself is not, it's not the end of the story. The root is much more interesting. Okay. Well, yeah. So we find it in a lot of words, in 4 words actually: reception, perception, conception, and deception, right? And of course, they have corresponding verbs: receive, perceive, conceive, and deceive. We can see the derivational pattern, yeah, which is also quite helpful. That comes from capere, which is to grasp or to take. Yeah, that's why. Yeah, we accept something, so something is accepted, it's taken out. When we accept, we take that in. The prefixes here are sometimes just intensifying prefixes, like per in perceive is through or completely. But if you compare that to the Russian vоспринимать, you will see something really very, very familiar. You will understand how the word is actually arranged, how it's made. Con is with, D is away or from. So if you are deceived, maybe something important is taken from you, trust or money. And re, which is back, of course, yeah, may originally have meant just take something back. The roots, C-E-I-V-E, are often mentioned when it comes to the famous mnemonic spelling rule, I after E, except after C, yeah, because actually we usually have IE in words like believe or friend, but not in these ones when they follow C. That may help students to grasp the different meanings of reception, which are so far from each other in all these contexts. So you can explain how one meaning may have led to the other. We may also remember the word receipt, which originally meant the act of receiving, and now it's a document which confirms that someone has received our money. Or deceit, which doesn't have P, of course, but again, it looks similar and is probably formed on the same pattern. Then imagine that some years later, in some years from now, when all the pandemic restrictions are lifted, we will travel. Our students will travel, they will go to Madrid, to the Museum of Prado, they will see the Immaculate Conception of Italian painter Giovanni Battista Tiepolo. They know conception, of course, everyone understands this word. So that's an idea, a theory, something that we have created in our mind, but they may wonder what it means here. So that brings us to the other meaning of conceive and conception, which is becoming pregnant. And we'll understand this, of course, and may think of this. Right? It's beautiful. I just think it's absolutely astonishing and fascinating. Another story, another little journey. A student comes across the word negligence, doesn't recognize, doesn't know it, although the student already knows neglect or neglectful. So we talk about these words. We talk about negligent, negligence, and negligible. We even talk about what suffixes, how suffixes work. Like IBLE makes negligible, conveys the meaning of being so small, so important that it can be neglected, or negligent conveys the meaning of having this quality of neglecting things. But we may stop here. But then we can look at this photo, the picture, and I ask my student to describe the way the girl is dressed. What do you think we can see here? What is she wearing? Underwear. I wanted to find a modern photo of this underwear, but I couldn't just put it on the screen at the university, sorry, for the sake of decency. Originally, that type of underwear or that type of clothing looked like something in the second picture in the 18th century, and that's the word. Negligee, which exists in English and of course in Russian, negligee. As you know, what's the connection between negligee and negligence? They obviously sound similar, so there must be something behind. Yeah, that's from that French word, which means to neglect. And the original idea was that while ladies in the 18th century woke up in the morning and met their first visitors wearing those loose gowns, they were in negligee. So that comes from, that comes from the Latin verb negligere, which means literally not to pick up, not to collect, but then it developed the meaning of being careless, indifferent to something, careless in your clothes, and finally careless and indifferent to your duties. Okay, but even that is not enough. Look at that. A familiar picture, we all know it. What is the man wearing? In Russian, he's wearing halat. So what's negligence in Russian? Halatность. It's astonishing, I think, that the languages have developed the meaning from items of clothing independently, just following the same train of thought. Okay, another example. These words seem unrelated again, or the pictures seem unrelated, and the words behind them, like you can see aqueducts and viaducts, aqueduki, viaduki. I don't think that students know these words in English, but maybe. Inductors, which are devices for generating electricity, so to say. I'm not sure myself what exactly inductors do, but it has something to do with electricity. May I remember the title of late Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh? And do you know this guy? Duce, which gives us this. The element D-U-C-T, D-U-C-E, from Latin ducere, which is to lead. And why are they called like that? Because they all lead. That may even explain the great mystery of conductors. Why such different things are called conductors? They all lead something, or they enable electricity to travel. They are materials which lead electricity. Okay, spelling. Conscience, a complicated word, a difficult, a tricky one. For many students, I think, yeah, even B1 students struggle, even B2 students sometimes struggle with the spelling. What if you break it down into con and science? Yeah, the pronunciation is different, of course, it has changed a lot, but like the Russian word совесть, conscience is actually joint knowledge, and that is what it originally meant. And the structure is more or less the same in all European languages, as far as I know. The word conscious or conscientious is actually the same. That's why we have N-S-C-I. Yeah, easy to remember that sequence of letters. Another word that may cause spelling problems, disease. Dis plus is. And it's easy, and I mean it, it's easy because, of course, people know, students know easy or ease, and originally disease meant what we now call discomfort, uneasiness, actually, and only later it developed its modern meaning. Okay, so finally, a really good example just to prove that it may be fun, as if it's not enough yet. So, for example, you have a really advanced student who knows some words like equivocal. Do you know it? Equivocal. Oh, you can see examples and you can work out, of course, what it means. But I myself struggled with remembering how to pronounce, how to write it. Yeah, it means ambiguous. Ambiguous, yeah. You can see two roots. The first is like in equal, equality, things like that. The second root is also easily recognizable, right? It's vocal, voice. So actually it meant having two equal voices, like in your mind maybe, or when someone answers your questions, you kind of hear two voices saying yes and no at the same time. So it's ambiguous, it's not clear, and so on. We have a Russian word of the same origin. Yes, and I already see someone saying that. Can't hear, but can. Yes, ekivoki. So same word, of course, borrowed by Russian into from French, but again another hook on which we can just hang the word equivocal. Well, that's about it. I've showed just some approaches to what can be done with etymology in the classroom. We may just tell our students about some things, and that's like mnemonic techniques, which I think work much better than some, I don't know, other mnemonics, which I absolutely hate. Or, which is much better, of course, we can encourage them to go into depth, to do their research, to come up with ideas, to draw their own connections. And besides, it provides with a lot of opportunities to discuss things. So that's speaking practice, that's spelling, that's vocabulary. I can just say that if you decide to set off on this etymological journey with your students, then good luck. That's it. Thank you. I think I'm not sure about my timing. Okay, yeah, oh, just exactly. It's 2 o'clock. Okay, thank you.
The timing wasn't perfect, of course.
Wasn't.
Wasn't.
We
But
started,
we
started
did
later.
Did we? Okay.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. I just have one question.
Okay.
How do you manage to make such wonderful discoveries? Because the presentation was really amazing.
Thank you very much. I started reading. I started reading books on etymology, and the etymological dictionary can help. Yes. Unfortunately, I didn't include any links here, just because maybe I wanted to amaze you, but it's not unique. And I can share these links maybe on Facebook. You can find me there, and I write about such stuff. Yeah. Thank you.
I wonder what level students are the most receptive to this kind of discoveries, this kind of journeys? What's your experience?
I think that all levels are receptive, but they need a different amount of guidance and help, of course. Yeah, with elementary students, we just, it's maybe sometimes enough to say, look, this word is similar to a word in Russian, which you know, a word from your professional area, which of course you know. Yeah, and they are like, oh, wow, I've never thought of it. For intermediate and upper intermediate, so B1, B2 mostly, and of course C1 students, you can just ask them to investigate on their own, and they may bring some discoveries.
Thank you.
Okay.
Let me invite the second speaker, Екатерина Валерьевна Дворецкая.
Good morning. Oh, afternoon already, actually. I consider myself very lucky because I'm a linguist. And the subject of my research, language, is an amazing organism, which is almost never the same in any one period of time. And so it's extremely interesting for me to research the changes that are happening in language. And I think it's obvious that over the last year, there have been a lot of changes in our reality, in our environment, and language obviously reflected these changes. That's how I came to research this topic of what new words have appeared in our language over the last year. And so which footprint has this extreme situation of the pandemic left on English, the language which I'm researching. And there have been a lot of studies about this over the year when 2020 finished, because as you know, many dictionaries and many language portals compile a sort of lists of word of the year. So I studied some of these lists, and I studied some of the examples of the new coinages and some new word combinations that were used over the year. And it became clear that, in fact, there were three main areas how the language changed in this. And of course, probably the most striking difference is the creation of some new words. Nevertheless, the language has also changed in the sense that some words that were previously used only by specialists came into general usage, and also that many words have developed some new specific to our reality meanings. So I would like to start with the old words that were revisited. And the first is obviously the word coronavirus. We may think it's something completely new, but in fact, the word was coined, the specific term was coined in the 60s when the family of these viruses was discovered. But nevertheless, this, according to the research of the Oxford languages, the foundation that compiles the Oxford Dictionary of English, the use of the word coronavirus, the frequency of the use of this word over the last year has increased tremendously for obvious reasons. And so we can, apart from just designating a specific family of viruses, it came to mean this specific virus which has caused the recent pandemic. And so this allowed the Oxford Dictionary to set it out as a kind of a separate new meaning of the word. And also, we can see here on this graph from the Oxford languages that the occurrence of this word spiked in March 2020, and despite the fact that later it was overtaken by another word to designate this specific virus, it's still much higher than it used to be before 2020. So another old word revisited was quarantine. Quarantine is actually a very interesting word because, again, some of us may know that it comes from Venetian, where it was first documented back in the 14th century. It came into use in English in the 15th century. But in a kind of a different meaning. You see, it used to mean the desert in which Christ fasted for 40 days, the period of 40 days in which a widow has the right to remain in her dead husband's home. So the idea of 40 was central there. And only after the Great London Plague in the 17th century, in English, it became used in the modern sense. But again, so the word has already existed in the language, but not much in use. You can see that on Google, there are about 265 million documents with the word quarantine, but the half of them relates to 2020. So we have seen a sort of a resurrection of this word, which was almost forgotten. Another interesting aspect of how some old-time words became again topical, we can see it on the example of wartime metaphors. Unfortunately, the first wave of the pandemic has hit very hard in many countries and in Britain, of course. So that's it was not surprising that there were a lot of metaphors and words that are related to the wartime used in that period. So we could see some headlines in the newspapers which spoke about the frontline workers, very especially common word combination. So the doctors were referred to as army of kind hearts, army of angels. So lots of expressions that were previously documented mainly in the context of World War I, World War II came into use again. To the extent even that although these usages were understandable, but many of those who these words referred to, like medical workers or essential workers, they even got frustrated by such uses. Being constantly referred to as heroes, but at the same time lacking some PPE and everything, caused movement on the internet where they asked to refrain from using wartime metaphors. So even to the extent that we see these workers saying that we were reduced from heroes to zeros, with a special spelling. So, but this was another feature of the language when again some older elements became once again topical. Another aspect, of course, that the new reality asked us to develop new meanings to the already existing words. So there were lots of words that acquired some specialized meaning in the context of the pandemic. Here you can see some of the examples from the Cambridge Dictionary, its online version, and from the coronavirus corpus, which is a very interesting resource compiled during 2020, which collects all the documents related to all the documents from the news, from the internet news related to the pandemic, and analyzes the language and the occurrence of word combinations and words in this. So you can see here, for example, the word shielding. Again, the word itself is nothing new, coming from shield. Yeah, it was already in use in the in football. Where shielding means a special position of a player when they put their body between the ball and the goalkeeper in order to in order for the opponent not to score the goal. But now, in the 2020, the word shielding was used in a completely different sense. We can see from this example from the Cambridge Dictionary, I think it is. So where it says shielding, it's basically like hiding in place or staying somewhere away in order not to contract the virus. The word curve. Of course, we all know that curve may mean a line on a graph. But again, in the context of the pandemic, the curve that was mostly spoken about was the number of patients in hospitals. So the word combination flattened the curve started to refer specifically to some measures in order to avoid the spike in patients in hospitals. And the Cambridge Dictionary decided that it deserved a special meaning, the special new meaning for the word curve, and they've included it in their dictionary. Well, there were other words that also slightly changed or had their meaning specified in the context of the pandemic. Lockdown, yes, not only English speakers, but Russian speakers and speakers of many other languages nowadays understand what lockdown is. But again, the word is not new. starting from the 19th century, it was used in a sense of, let me quote, it was used in the meaning of to restrict access to a place because of some danger, as a verb, to lock down and subsequently restricted access. But again, nowadays, when we speak about lockdown without any specification, we probably all understand that it is the specific measures by the government to contain the spread of a disease. So as you may know, Collins Dictionary of English even decided that lockdown deserved to be called the word of the year 2020. Bubble, another interesting example, yeah, because from a very direct meaning, it came to mean a group of people who have no access, who have contact within each other, but no contact with other groups. And again, as a measure of restricting contagion. And so this word bubble became especially used in British English. Interestingly, in American English, they prefer the use the word pod. And so pod became a word of choice for the Americans in the same meaning as this restricted group of people. So you see, all these words, they develop new meanings. And nowadays, when we speak about support bubble, as in this example from the news, most people will understand that it has nothing to do with this, you know, a water bubble, for example. Okay, so the repurposing of the existing words was one of the features of the changes in language, but of course, probably the most amazing ones are the new creations that the pandemic speak, or the coronavirus speak, as it is sometimes referred to on the news, has developed. Here you can see some of the examples of such new coinages. And obviously, lots of them come from the stem coronavirus or COVID itself. If this pandemic, if nothing, this pandemic has proven one thing: people, in all circumstances, people are able to be creative with the language. So, for instance, I absolutely love this: corona babies, quarantines, you see. So, or for example, COVID divorce, a divorce caused by people who lived together in the lockdown. Coronageddon, coronavirus plus Armageddon. So it's when the end of the world was predicted because of the coronavirus. So, and lots of others. These are just some of the examples. Also, the words that were created from these stems could refer not only to these blends, but you could see examples of pre-post-COVID. Yeah, so when COVID was used as like referring to time, the year BC. Yeah, you think it's before Christ? No, it's before coronavirus. Covidio party, corona apocalypse, and many others. So these are some of the examples. It's a sure sign that the word has become embedded in the language when it gets its own abbreviations, changes, and when people start making creative use of it. So with one more creative change that the word coronavirus has experienced happened in Australian English initially, but now, thanks to the internet, thanks to globalization, lots of people all over the world already understand it. So corona was shortened for Rona. Yeah, it's common for Australian English to use shorter forms of the word. And for example, in March 2021, when many countries celebrated the sad anniversary of the first lockdowns, you could see a hashtag on the media, on the social media, in YouTube, like "Happy Roniversary" or something like this. So. Australian English actually brought about some more examples of creative usage. For example, sanitizer was shortened to Sani. Quarantine actually became quaz. It's from quarantine, and the name of, sometimes Australia is referred to as the land of Oz. Yeah, so this became quarantine in Australia. So some of the examples of Australian English coronavirus speak. Well, you have probably noticed that many of those creative usages are examples of blending. Blending in itself, again, it's nothing new. That's probably one of the most common ways of creating new words in English today. And blending, though it's not very old phenomenon too, researchers think that mostly the first blends are attributed to Lewis Carroll. It's so unlike compounding, when the words are combined together on the basis of morphemes, when it comes to blending, the sound is much more important. So people combine two words together based on how they sound, whether they fit each other in terms of sound. So Lewis Carroll did a lot of those in his little poems, which he included in Alice in Wonderland. And so journalists were especially eager to create such blends ever since. So the coronavirus speak has also given us some interesting blends. For example, infodemic, which is the epidemic of information, mostly negative information. Yeah, doom scrolling. It's when you spend a lot of time behind the screen, behind the computer, looking for negative news. So obviously from doom and scrolling the screen. Blur's Day, an indefinite day of the week during lockdown. Yeah. Zoom bombing. So again, some of the examples here, it's kind of self-explanatory. It's when pranksters interrupt meetings on Zoom with offensive material. These are just some of the examples. Actually, you can find lots of others. If you look, as I previously said, if you look at this coronavirus corpus, which combines lots of it, or I can refer you to the Oxford Languages report on the year 2020, which also gives lots of very creative examples of blends. Well, one more aspect that we should say about of the changes that occurred is that some collocations, not just new words, but new collocations for the already known words appeared. For example, if you look at these pictures, you can probably recognize phrases like this first one is social distancing. Yeah, again, the word itself themselves existed in it, but in this collocation, social distancing, they became extremely relevant over the year. The picture left below is, can you guess? What are they doing? Greet each other, but what is the specific type of greeting called nowadays? Elbow bump, elbow bump. Yeah. A person lying with a laptop on the beach is a digital nomad. Nowadays, with the help of technology, we can work anywhere, or we can move around the world. So such people who don't live in one specific place and continue working in one specific company, for example, or place of work, can be called digital nomads. And they became extremely relevant during the pandemic. And finally, can you guess what is happening in the last picture? Because of it could be homeschooling, yeah, but this particular, it refers to the man himself. He is working from home, yeah? So working from home became a very popular phrase, even to the extent that it is now used simply as an acronym. WHF, or WFH, and even it is sometimes used as a verb, to WFH. So he is WFHing. Oh. So also, an interesting phenomenon is that the frequency of some collocations has changed mostly. For example, these data from the Oxford Languages Report suggests that before 2020, the most common word combination with the word remote was, for example, remote village, remote island, but the number of texts that now use it in combination with remote learning or working or workforce is much, much higher nowadays. And the same has happened, for example, to the word Zoom. Again, before 2020, when you heard of Zoom, you probably thought about some optics, about cameras. Nowadays, of course, this is this digital tool that we are using now. Yeah. So the frequency of collocations has changed. Well, and as a conclusion, I would like to say that there is no denial that the lifestyle of many people has changed tremendously over this last year, and these changes were to be reflected in the language. But I find these changes sort of reassuring, because if we look at it, not much has changed. I mean, languages have always responded to some challenges with coming up with new vocabulary, blending has been one of the most popular methods of word formation in English well before the pandemic. And new creative words were being coined almost always. So it is this stability that I find reassuring, because I think it gives us hope that this too shall pass. Thank you. Any questions? Oh. Okay, then just like to say once again that if you are interested in this kind of new word formations, I refer you to this Oxford Languages Report, which is extremely detailed, and it shows you the frequency of all different types of new word combinations or words occurring, and also to the coronavirus corpus, which you can find as part of the resource, the English Corpora, on the internet. Thank you.
So our next speaker is Anna Cherneshova, PhD, the owner of ABC Language School from Tambov.
Good afternoon. I've been quite far from scientific research for a couple of years, and when I got introduced to participate in the conference, that actually came as a surprise. And that's why today I'm going to share a very practical presentation, and it's a very practical topic, helping learners to improve their ability to write cover letters. The reason why it's chosen, I'm pretty sure that everybody knows what the cover letter and the theory behind it is well known, and it's really, really boring. And that's one of the reasons why I've chosen this particular topic, because teaching a lot of exam students and teaching a lot of adults, I actually came across a problem that students usually do not like writing classes. And as soon as you mention that next lesson is going to be writing, basically lots of your students disappear, or they become sick, or something happens. And that's why I decided that studying this topic and maybe trying to make it more interesting is important, to make sure that students do not overlook this important sphere of learning and this important skill. So to start my presentation, I'll start with some basic things. So it is known that it is through the mastery of writing that the individual comes to be fully effective intellectual organization. That is a quotation I found in Tribble, his work of 1996. And writing cover letters is an important skill, as most adult English learners have instrumental motivation in learning English, as they need to apply for jobs, they really need to write cover letters, and they really need this skill not only while taking their exams, but in real life. That is a really, really important skill, but associated with boredom. And because of this, the skill is overlooked, the writing is not edited, and a lot of questions arise just because of this particular sphere. So I have general ideas about what is a cover letter. I think we'll just look very quickly through them. Maybe that is something which is worth mentioning to learners, or maybe just giving them some kind of an overview, which you can send to them online, which is now happens to everybody. You can send it before the class, so they just read the theory, especially the adult learners, they can do it by themselves. And then when they come to the class, they already have some background. So that is a formal letter describing the accompanying documents or other items and the reasons for sending them. Apparently, the cover letter is a type of transactional letter, as it has specific purpose to get a job and is written in response to a written input, that is a job vacancy. It introduces a candidate and their qualifications to a potential employer. Approaching this task, I decided to look at what an expert writer should know when writing a cover letter and what an expert writer should do when writing a cover letter. So it looks like we should know quite a lot. First of all, we should remember about the purpose of cover letters, and it is to convince a potential employer that the writer is suitable for the position and is worth to be asked to come to an interview. This can be achieved through demonstrating interest in the company or particular vacancy, drawing attention to your CV, highlighting experience and qualifications which are relevant to a particular vacancy. It is important to understand that values and self-interests of the recipient of a cover letter increases your chances of writing a successful letter. Cover letters are a type of reader-based prose, and that is very important because whatever we want to tell about ourselves in a cover letter, we need to measure and we will need to try to view through the eyes of the person reading them. That's why the tenor is of crucial importance when writing that. The expert writer thinks about what the reader needs to know, how to make information clear and accessible, and what an appropriate style is, as this can help him or her to get a particular job. So speaking about content and organization, general ideas. So what we need to include, we include writer's address, reader's address and date, apparently salutation, which we teach our students, introduction, the information about the job and the writer, the job the writer is seeking, how they heard of it, the main body, description of experience and qualifications related to position, closing, where we express willingness to meet at reader's convenience and thanking him for their time, consideration, and attention, and finally signing off. What have I done? Yeah. So now coming to the register. Register is highly influenced by the genre, and it determines experienced writers' lexical choices. So here we need to speak about lexes. The expert writer uses a lot topic-related lexes. There are examples in brackets. The experienced writer also uses chunks of functional language, which we apparently need our students. Then we need to think about grammar. Here I wrote present perfect because my students, pretty much all levels and even B2 and C1 have problems with them, with this particular tense. With Russian students, it's clear because we don't have particular tense in our language. If we teach Spanish speaking students, the problem is that they use present perfect differently. So that's why they also encounter problems. That's why I stated it here. Then we come to style. Cover letters are written in formal style, and I think one of the most important spheres which cause lots of problems is lexical density and nominalized style, which create a distant relationship between the reader, making the letter sound formal. So what the expert writer should do when writing a cover letter? Apparently there are some stages. The first one will be planning, but as we write about our own experience, it doesn't require a lot of time and consideration at this stage. Then we come to drafting, and I always try to tell my students that this particular sphere, we only review the letter mostly at sentence and paragraph level, because more thorough editing comes next. That's where we review our macro features, such as content, organization, and layout, and micro features, such as lexis, discourse, grammar, and style. And finally, we create a final draft. So this is basically the part of the theory which is good when your students know, especially if we're speaking about B2, C1 students. And then I think the teacher also needs to think about problems the learners can encounter. And one of the problems which I actually come across with my Russian students writing cover letters is that we have problems with layout, especially writing the address. As we write address differently in Russia, we start with the countries and town, and only then we have the street address. And also the level of formality is very different, and that's why it's very difficult to teach Russian students to be as formal as important and to keep to those formality, to that level of formality required for cover letters. The other problem, which I think is worth paying attention to, is that students usually struggle to keep the style of the cover letter formal, and they frequently use contractions, phrasal verbs, personal tone while addressing the reader. And here I would always try to emphasize that not all phrasal verbs are bad. There are a lot of formal phrasal verbs, and I think the teacher is supposed to make that distinction clear and show which phrasal verbs can be used and which shouldn't be. And the last problem is that students do not revise, they do not edit. For example, even when I work with C1 students, they're very meticulous at checking their speaking pieces, but somehow they're very lazy and not very concentrated while working on writing. And to overcome these problems, I would like to share with you a lesson plan, which I very often use, and which I think kind of changes this perception of writing as a very boring skill. So to teach cover letters, to teach cover letters, to teach writing cover letters, I usually start with this slide. So here I have the best job in the world, the desert island caretaker wanted. I guess many of you have heard about this job advert. It was on TV. I think there was a kind of a competition a couple of years ago, maybe about 5 years ago. So they offered to earn £70,000, work only 12 hours a month for six months. Duties were quite fancy, such as feeding turtles, watching whales, picking up the island post, and writing a weekly online blog. So what we usually do with the students, we have a kind of a class discussion of who would like to do this job, what kind of experience and qualification a person needs to do this job. So we usually brainstorm these ideas and come to some ideas together, discuss them in a group. Then I have the other slide showing this person and asking the question if they think he got the job. First of all, we just discuss the person, what they think he's like, what qualifications he might have, what are his character traits. And then apparently we come to the cover letter itself, because here I have the cover letter from this particular person to apply for this job. So we actually read it through very attentively, try to understand why he might have got this job. And then I reveal it to my students that apparently he did get the job. He was the one person chosen among 35,000 of applicants. And this is the sample cover letter which we work with through the class, because then apparently we need to analyze these macro and micro features which I was talking about. And the way we usually do it is the following. We label the parts of the cover letter. So here are traditional parts which we all have. And here is a letter that is the same letter, but it's done as a handout, so you can actually label it. We usually do it in groups or pairs so that it's more interactive and students can talk to each other. That's perfect in multi-language groups when we're not teaching only Russian students, but when there are several languages. So they practice their speaking skills anyway while discussing it with each other. The next stage will be analyzing functional language, which you will find in any book. And here we try to fill in the table with phrases to talk about experience, phrases to talk about skills and qualifications, and requests to the reader. So that is how we get all our functional language, which I want my students have while writing their cover letter. And finally, we need to come to write something by ourselves. And I decided to make it also a little bit more fun, because we are trying to apply for quite a fancy job called Northern Lights Sporter. Actually, it's a real job. I Googled it. I found it online while trying to find some unusual job vacancy. So the Arctic Snow Hotel in Finland is looking for a seasonal staff member to monitor northern lights. So the duties are to stay up all night, alert the hotel guests if northern lights happen. And that's what we actually do during the class, because we have already looked at all the features of the cover letter. We gathered the vocabulary to write, and students usually complete this task in pairs or in groups, which makes it more interactive. And then after this is done, we usually have a kind of an exhibition of students' works in the classroom. So I get them all up and they go around to look what each group wrote. And we usually vote for the best applicant who should get this particular job. And hopefully in this way, we manage to get general idea of how to write cover letters, to gain some vocabulary and some grammar and functional language, how to approach the task. And after the class, students usually get the real task of writing their own cover letter. So to equip them with more tools to check and to make sure that they revise it well, I usually include the cover letter checklist, which they can use by themselves. So they read through, they tick what they've done, they come back to what they haven't done, hopefully edit it well. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much the lesson on the cover letters, which I wanted to share with you today. Thanks for your attention. And if there are any questions, I would be glad to answer them. I think I'm even ahead a little bit, yeah. Mm-hmm.
This is so cool. Can you hear me? Okay, great. My name is Julia Blinova, and I'm very happy to be here in person. It's been such a long time since I've really talked to real people and not to people online. So really happy to be here. But this also means that I'm a little bit rusty with presenting in person. So if there are any hiccups, sorry. Okay. A few words about me, and something that I would like you to keep in mind during my presentation on the Synchronous Speaking Club is that I work with people one-to-one. I work with adults only these days, and most of them are either learning English for general purposes or business English. But I do have experience teaching other kinds of courses, and I used to work with teenagers, I think like for 5-7 years. I'm also a big enthusiast of using psychology in language teaching and language learning, and technology too. So that's my take on what we can do to help our students improve their speaking. So I'm going to start with context and how the idea of an asynchronous speaking club was born. Then we're going to take a look at the preparation stages, talk about the mechanics. So I'll explain how it works. We'll talk about issues and the outcomes, and hopefully we'll have some time for a Q&A. So let's start. I want to transport you back in time to March and April 2020, when Moscow was in lockdown, and that's what the center of Moscow looked like. At that time, I think that we all just went online and started communicating not only with colleagues, but friends and family. I could see it with my students, and I could see my friends and family doing the same. But the more we kind of got used to doing that, the more I understood that instead of Zooming all the time and doing video conferencing, people started getting into their routines, their work routines too. So they had less time for this kind of synchronous communication. And they switched to using messengers and messaging apps instead. But to keep this kind of personal touch, we were using voice messaging instead of just texts. So this is what happened. These were the trends that I noticed. I think it was like late May, the beginning of summer. And looking at these trends, I understood that they look very interesting, and I could actually use them to do something for my students. I had been entertaining the idea of a synchronous speaking club for a long time, but as I work with students one-to-one, it was very hard to find the time and the place which was suitable for everybody. That's why I decided that these are just what we need, and let's build on them. Build from what? At that time, I was teaching two groups of students, I would say, business English and general English students, all of them one-to-one. You can see that their levels were quite different, and the age groups too, but they had things in common. First, they were all interested in improving their speaking, which is, I think, not surprising, because if you ask students, what would you like to do more of? What do they say? Absolutely, most of the time, for once. And then as for speaking with my business English students, usually they were quite good at discussing their business topics, but they were struggling with small talk. And small talk was really important for them because this is a way of establishing relationships and actually doing business. So I decided that we can talk about general English topics and how everybody was using WhatsApp. All my students, both to communicate with me, so I knew for sure that they could do that, and to get in touch with their family, I suppose, too. So keeping in mind that I work with students one-to-one, how many students do you think I had at that time? Any other ideas? Thank you very much. I can't really teach 30 students at the same time. There is only one of me. 10 participants. This is an important number. On the one hand, it can look like, too few students for a club. On the other hand, maybe it's too big. Just keep it in mind, because when we will talk about outcomes, you will see why it's important. Okay, so what I assumed about all this business was that we should be doing it definitely synchronously. People were just too busy to find time for another Zoom meeting during the week for sure. We'll focus on speaking and we'll choose general English topics. It will work. I was a little bit worried about my lower level students because I had like a 1+ student. So how level appropriate would it be for her? So when coming up with the content for the club, I always included questions which can be answered by lower level students. Worked pretty well. And of course, they were all enough tech savvy to deal with WhatsApp and understand how to record messages, how to reply to messages, and so on. So I expected enthusiastic participation, of course, because I was building on the trends, wasn't I? And also it was asynchronous, so you can do it anytime and any place. Also, I thought that students would be more interested in talking to each other, not me, because they got enough of me during class. Believe me, I love speaking. And I also hope that it wouldn't be too time consuming, again, keeping in mind that they were spending a lot of time in front of screens for work or for studying, whatnot. So my assumption was 10-15 minutes per week. So that was kind of a hypothesis that I had, that this asynchronous speaking club would be beneficial for my students, both psychologically and linguistically, and that they would participate enthusiastically. So let's vote. Who believes that I was right? Nobody? Wow, you're a tough audience, really. Well, I'll tell you if I was right or not. So the preparation part. I started with dealing with these 3 points. First, I had to introduce this idea, to sell this idea to my students. Then I had to establish some rules, a code of conduct, if you wish, and of course, to find content appropriate for discussions. I started with a personal touch. I contacted each of my students directly by sending them a message like this on WhatsApp, actually. I chose to use L1 because I wanted my goals very, very clear. What I did was to highlight not only their language benefits, but also the psychological benefits, so they could communicate with people, interesting people, discuss interesting things with them. I was very clear on where, when, and how it's going to be happening, and I think that was the key. And of course, I was sure that they would have questions because it was a completely new format for them. So I invited them to ask me about it, which they did in class, or they replied to my message on WhatsApp, so we could clear any ground we needed. And of course, I set the starting date. And that was very important because I think it really encouraged students to decide very fast whether they wanted to take part in it or not. Then I sent them the set of rules they were supposed to be following. Remember, that was supposed to be a speaking club. So my idea was to make sure that they would know that there was no texting allowed. The idea was to communicate using voice messages. So I included it in the set of rules, again, using L1 just to make sure that everything was 100% clear. I wanted them to speak English only. It's again in the rules to make sure that they knew that. And my idea was that they should be talking to each other, not to me. I didn't want them to record messages and then forget about them or kind of create long monologues. No. So that's why I included in the set of rules that they had to listen to other participants, other clubbers, and to comment on them, record voice messages in reply. I thought that if we're talking about rules, establishing respect is very important. Actually, my idea was to create a community of learners. That's why I invited everybody to address each other using their names and to treat each other with respect and kindness. One more thing, I'm always thinking about conflicts and conflict situations potentially. And I believe that if you're creating something like this, when people can't really see each other, you should have some rules for conflict resolution. I decided that I would be the final judge of who is at fault. And that's why in the rules it says that it's up to me to resolve any kind of conflict. The clubbers were welcome to contact me if they needed me. And of course, content. Well, I think that that was actually maybe the easiest part because there are so many resources for speaking clubs out there. There are special books. You can even use textbooks, up to you. There are online resources. And I think that on the last slide of my presentation, there are a few links to the websites that I really like. But I would actually encourage you, if you choose to do something like this, is to consider yourself as a resource. Because ultimately asking yourself this question, what would you ask a friend, for me produce the most successful discussion topics? You can see that in the corner there is parsnips. Does anybody know what it stands for? Okay. Absolutely, you can't really yeah, you can't really find them in published materials most of the time. So politics, right? What is A? A. Alcohol. Religion, then absolutely sex. Narcotics, drugs. I. fascism, Nazism, and all other isms. No, they're called isms. Can be veganism, so things too. What is P? Yes, pork. And I think that's all. Am I right? Yeah. I would also include health in this list of topics, just from personal experience. That not the best one. Anyway, these are also the topics that usually are not touched upon in small talk. Remember, I was teaching business English students, and small talk was kind of what I was wanted them to work with in the club. So, how it all worked. Every Monday, I greeted my students with a recap of the previous week. So I let them know that they did a good job, even if they didn't. It was all about motivation and encouragement. I touched upon some highlights, maybe some interesting ideas or shared experience, and then I signposted the new week. I think it's really very important to, it was very important for me to make sure that they understood that the new week was starting and we were talking about a different topic. So using a photo, the name of the week, really helped that, because when you're scrolling through the WhatsApp chat, you could see a photo, something different from what they usually saw. I tried to introduce the topic in a personal way. So I was usually typing something like, you know, last week I heard that, my friends and I were talking about this, and so on. And I also reminded them that they were supposed to choose a couple of questions to talk about, and that they should listen to other participants and comment on what they had to say. Sometimes I shared some extra resources. For instance, when we were talking about St. Patrick's Day, I was sure that some of my students didn't really know much about it. So they had some videos to watch or things to read if they wanted to. So that was not obligatory. During the week, I behaved, well, I used kind of three strategies. Either I got involved, especially when I could see my students struggling with starting. I think one of the weeks we had kind of a storytelling topic. So I just shared my story on that topic with them, invited them to reply to me, and it worked wonderfully. So they had a model and they became more confident and more willing to participate. I sent students private reminders that there were new questions for discussion in the WhatsApp club, because they were all busy professionals, and I was like, okay, it's not a problem for me to send you a message. And it really worked. After this, they participated and they were always very thankful for the reminder. Sometimes I just left it. Some topics didn't work, and I was okay with that. Sometimes the discussions were so involved that they didn't need me at all, so I stayed away. What went wrong? Lots of things could go wrong, and some of them did. So first, participation, as I have already told you, right? I expected enthusiastic participation. You voted nay for that. Well, most of the time, they were really enthusiastic, so enthusiastic that they started sharing different resources and links with each other. So then I just kept away and enjoyed the discussions from a distance. But sometimes, yes, I had to get involved really into it and carry the week on my shoulders. Some topics did not work. And here I'm inviting you to guess which topic was the worst topic to introduce for a speaking club last year. Absolutely. Here I was thinking, oh my goodness, you need all this vocabulary. Come on, guys, let's practice. No, nobody wanted to talk about this. In my experience, the simpler the better. People love talking about themselves, their childhood, their family, hobbies, shopping, being constantly online worked better than COVID-19 and so on. So keep it simple, especially if we are talking about a genuine English speaking club or practicing small talk. Don't overcomplicate. And well, as for rule breaking, thankfully, all my students read their rules carefully and kept them in mind. So there wasn't a lot of there weren't a lot of instances of rule breaking. Sometimes they forgot to comment on other participants' contributions. I was okay with that, just reminded them, you know, here are the rules. please take another look. And I think it was only once when the message got sent late. Well, things happen. It was okay. So, did it work? That was my assumption, right? You already know that the participation was not as enthusiastic as I hoped, but what about the benefits? Were there any? Let me tell you that the results were amazing because the fluency of the students improved drastically. They noticed that without me prompting them to think about that. What is more, we really could implement all these strategies, which are very hard to practice if we're talking about one-to-one classes. So turn taking, communication breakdowns, all those things which they needed but couldn't practice that much with me. I have already told you that sometimes they really got involved. So that was real communication for them. As for psychological benefits, I managed to create a community. I was amazed actually, because I think that was a hard job to do. And they really supported each other. All the other participants supported my A1 plus student, encouraged her, and it was like amazing, unbelievable, great for use. And it was a motivation boost. And it was a motivation boost not only for my students, but also for me, because I listened to their recordings and I was amazed at how fluent and proficient they could be in real communication. I was like, my goodness, you can really do that.
Сегодня ничего не задала, потому что вы сегодня в библиотеку пошли. Она сказала, там что-то принести надо на труды.
Was it worth it? Absolutely. So if you choose to do something like this, I think that you should keep in mind your students, their needs. Don't overcomplicate it. And it shouldn't really take a lot of time because there are a lot of resources that you can use for content. Okay. Oh, the club is alive. We're still clubbing, we're still speaking. So it usually takes, I think, 10-15 minutes per week for me to keep it up. So, no. Okay. If you have any other questions, I will be happy to answer them. Yep.
Okay, right, I'll start all over. So it's not a question, it's more a suggestion, because during pandemic, there are a lot of speaking clubs like this online, and you can find links on Facebook. I think there are some on my page because my students joined them when the pandemic started. And the interesting thing about them is that they're not only for Russian students, and I think it's very motivating because students understand they cannot resort to Russian because people don't understand. And it's kind of a universal community nowadays. And one of the platforms which I use with my school students is iDialogue. It's completely free. So you can just register there, students can register there, and they can easily participate in such discussions. They can record themselves, they can message. And interesting thing is that it's much easier for a teacher because you don't have to moderate it. It's already there, there are news, and there are different parts of news, and they are according to the level. So the student visits and clicks like, okay, intermediate to upper intermediate group. Okay, what's on the news? Who would like to discuss it? I would like to discuss this topic. And they just jump in and discuss it. And now online on Facebook, you can find a lot of groups of teachers all around the world. Actually, you usually Google like Delta teachers or Salta teachers, and you calculated Salta, you know, there is a big Salta community. And there is the same big Delta community of teachers who try to improve speaking of their students. And they do it like as international group of students, and they have different projects. For those who like online communication, for my students, apparently not for adults, but for teens, we had a great project of snail mail during pandemic, because we all got tired of Zooming, of texting and everything. So we had mail exchange with students from Germany, Poland, UK, and we sent the real mail. I mean, it took time, it took some money, but we had such an excitement of students getting a letter and, you know, reading it at school and then writing another letter. Apparently it was not that much speaking, but it was good communication and they practiced a lot. So maybe you would like to implement that in your teaching as well.
Thank you for the contribution, but I do have something to say to that. I'm like aware that what I'm doing is not brand new. But my idea was to create a safe environment. I wanted to moderate it, to make sure that my students felt comfortable, because what you're talking about is ready-made and available, absolutely. And the most motivated students don't need me, they can do that on their own, right? But I had students who were much less motivated, and this allowed me to make them speak and speak more and speak better.
I mean, if it works for your students, that's the most important thing about it. I was just thinking that maybe somebody would consider it, maybe not you, maybe somebody of participants, maybe somebody of our Zoom participants, because it's a really good idea. And I think from my experience, a lot of students want to talk to people who learn language, maybe from other cultures, because they can share a lot of life experience, they can learn a lot. And there are actually groups where there are native speakers who would like to participate. Apparently, they're not learning language, they are sharing this knowledge, which is, I think, a lot of people would like to speak to natives. Why?
Yeah, why?
Why not?
Most of my students do not speak to native speakers. They communicate in English as lingua franca.
But don't you think they lose on that?
Сейчас сделаю, я уйду отсюда, мне отправить надо сообщение.
Don't you think they lose from this communication, which is with Russian English? Like when you speak with native speakers, you acquire a lot of features of speech which you do not acquire from the same speaker of your own language. That is the pleasure of multi-language groups.
I always consider my students' goals. My students do not do business with the UK and the US and Australia. They do business with Germany, Poland, Slovenia, things like that. So these are the language. This is the language they need.
Okay. It was just a suggestion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I take it your students were at different levels of English. Did it create any problems? If yes, how did you deal with them?
Well, my main concern was that the questions that I was offering were too complicated for the lower level students. So I included something, let's say, easier for them. But ultimately, what my lower level students told me was that it required more preparation time for them. But as for the communication itself, there was maybe only one instance of communication breakdown. So when the lower student was not understood at all by the other clubbers, well, in the end, they didn't need me. They figured it out. So they asked us extra questions. One of the clubbers contacted me and I just advised, you know, if you're not sure what they mean, ask them. Why are you asking me? So give them some learning autonomy here. Mine managed.
So stronger students didn't mind talking to someone who they might thought being inferior to them. Was okay.
Absolutely not, because, you know, even in my classroom, I try to create an atmosphere of, well, acceptance, I suppose. Again, if they are using English as lingua franca, some of the speakers might not have the same level they do, so they have to be able to communicate with people who have lower level of English. And that was kind of the idea that I was supporting. So I was telling them, you can benefit from such situations. And in the end, they agreed, because actually the speaking club was a part of an action research. So I conducted surveys and got feedback from the students to prove what I'm telling you.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question. Well, was it an additional practice of English for your students, WhatsApp communication, or did you have real lessons of English during that time?
Oh,
I mean, WhatsApp communication, was it the only English practice for your students, or did you have some other English lessons with your students?
Yeah, I got it. All those people were my students. So they were having classes regularly at that time. Some of them work in international environments, so they had some kind of practice outside the classroom too. Some were even, they found themselves having more free time, so they took advantage of the kind of platforms that Anna talked about. So yes, thank you.
And we have one more question from the chat. Have you tried a synchronous speaking club? If yes, did it work better or worse than the asynchronous one? Synchronous versus asynchronous. Have you tried synchronous speaking clubs?
Have I tried? With my students, okay, not personally. Well, the problem for me, and I have already said that, is finding the time that can be suitable for everybody, because I'm doing one-to-one classes. So far, no. And out of my 10 students, only one was really, I don't know how to put it. She really wanted us to have a synchronous meeting, but everybody else was like, no, I don't want to spend more time in front of the screen. So this can be understandable. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the questions.
Colleagues, we have finished. So we have finished the part of workshops, and we have only 1 minute for a break because we started a little bit later. But I think that maybe we will do it optionally. I mean that if you need to have a break, you can do it, but I think we can start and others can move. So it's up to you if you need to. So what we are going to do now is to start the panel discussions, and we have 3 panel discussions running concurrently, and here we are going to sorry, I need to have, so yes, so technology assisted teaching of foreign languages for specific purposes. Kasheva Anna Vladimirovna will be moderating this discussion, and we have some online participants, and Anna Vladimirovna will be giving a talk off here. Anna Vladimirovna, shall we start, or do we need some time? Okay, let's wait.
Здравствуйте, уважаемые коллеги. Надеюсь, что меня слышно. Рада приветствовать вас в секции, которая называется Technology Assisted Teaching of a Foreign Language for Languages for Specific Purpose. Обучение иностранным языкам с помощью использования для специальных целей с использованием технических средств обучения. Очень хочется проверить, есть ли у нас все докладчики, подключились ли, удалось ли вам подключиться. Дытко Екатерина Викторовна. Екатерина.
Здесь. Я здесь. Просто не включила видео. Здравствуйте.
Хорошо. Есть ли здесь Петрова Ирина Витальевна? Петрова Ирина Витальевна.
Да, здравствуйте, да, здесь.
Здравствуйте, Ирина Витальевна, очень приятно. Кузнецова Наталья Владимировна и Денекина Екатерина Владимировна. Я так поняла, что это коллективное выступление. Есть ли коллеги здесь? Подключились ли? Нет, не слышно пока. И Топурия Валентина Федоровна. Валентина Федоровна. Что ж, я хочу предоставить слово, чтобы не терять наше с вами время, доценту, кандидату филологических наук, доцента Донского государственного технологического университета Татьяне Эдвардовне Бондаревой, как нашему первому гостю в секции. Тема выступления заявлена «Мобильный телефон как средство обучения на уроках английского языка». Пожалуйста, Татьяна Эдвардовна, мы вас ждем с вашим выступлением. Подключайтесь, подключайте свой микрофон. Так. Дытко Екатерина Викторовна.
Я здесь.
Екатерина Викторовна, давайте тогда ваш доклад заявлен следующим, простите, название доклада выступления «Профессионально ориентированный компонент как средство формирования цифрового потенциала студентов вузов физической культуры». Ну и по данным вы старший преподаватель кафедры иностранных языков ФЛГАФК «Великие Луки». Очень такая сжатая аббревиатура. Пожалуйста, слово вам.
Хорошо, спасибо большое. Сейчас я постараюсь подключиться. Если меня не очень хорошо будет видно.
Видно вас хорошо.
Да.
Если она есть.
Да, все есть. Одну секундочку. Если презентацию видно.
Пока нет. Да, что можно сделать, чтобы было видно? Видно, хорошо. Вот видно слева. Коллеги, всем ли видно?
Ага.
Да, все пошло, да.
Окей. So just one more second so that it launches properly. Okay. Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги, участники конференции. Представляю вашему вниманию довольно интересный аспект, посвященный профессионально ориентированному обучению и цифровому потенциалу обучающихся. В данном случае я представляю вуз физической культуры, академической культуры, Псковская область, город Великие Луки. Вопросы профессионально ориентированного обучения иностранному языку всегда были и остаются актуальными в связи с рядом динамических трансформационных процессов в обществе и системе высшего образования в России. Традиционное взаимодействие преподаватель-студент в наше время переходит в дистанционную или смешанную форму с активным применением мобильных приложений, образовательных платформ. На данной основе необходимо рассчитывать на профессионально ориентированное обучение и рассматривать его как один из ключевых компонентов цифрового потенциала обучающегося вуза физической культуры. Применение информационных компьютерных технологий оказывает существенное влияние на все аспекты личности в цифровом пространстве, на ее мотивацию, на творческие способности, на иерархию потребностей. Исследователи рассматривают разные виды потенциалов личности человека. Это и познавательный, и ценностный, и созидательный, коммуникативный, художественный, а также профессиональный. В нашем исследовании, посвященном развитию информационного потенциала обучающихся вузов физической культуры, рассматривались в том числе творческий, интеллектуальный, интеллектуально-творческий, образовательный, коммуникативный и научный потенциал. С точки зрения процесса становления будущего специалиста физической культуры и спорта, например, тренера-преподавателя, необходимо оценивать взаимосвязь профессионального потенциала с цифровым. В различных исследованиях отмечается, что профессиональный потенциал молодежи – это интегральная характеристика профессионально значимых качеств и возможностей молодого поколения, которая формируется и реализуется под воздействием совокупности определенных факторов. В социальном измерении профессиональный потенциал – это в первую очередь характеристика возможности использования обществом знаний, умений и навыков молодежи. В ином личностном измерении профессиональный потенциал – это характеристика возможности реализации молодежи, проявления своих внутренних личностных сил, позволяющих при воспроизводстве профессиональных ситуаций обеспечить выполнение профессиональной деятельности с заданным уровнем качества. Цифровой или же информационный потенциал личности определяется нами как определенная модель потенциала личности, способная адаптироваться и развиваться в условиях цифровой информационной революции. Профессиональный потенциал, таким образом, является значимой частью цифрового потенциала с точки зрения наличия у обучающихся багажа накопленных знаний, умений и навыков и их реализации в цифровом пространстве. Профессионально ориентированный компонент цифрового потенциала обучающихся вузов физической культуры будет определять способность обучающихся визуализировать собственные цели получения образования и профессиональных знаний, адекватно воспринимать те задачи, которые создавались социумом как образ будущего специалиста в сфере физической культуры и спорта, применять соответствующие цифровые ресурсы для совершенствования своих знаний, умений и навыков. В качестве средства интеграции профессионально ориентированной составляющей модель цифрового потенциала обучающихся в вузах физической культуры вступает иностранный язык. Определение успешности формирования цифрового потенциала на основе развития профессионально ориентированного компонента обучающихся в вузах физической культуры в Академии спорта физической культуры город Великие Луки с 2017 по 2021 год осуществлялись анализ активности обучающихся бакалавриата и магистратуры всех направлений подготовки в проектах НИРС и УИРС на основе обработки статистических данных отчетов по научной работе кафедры иностранных языков Академии спорта, а также обобщение, во-первых, результатов тестирования обучающихся на определение уровня владения иностранным языком по общеевропейской шкале языковой компетенции, Free Standardized English Test Calibrated to CEFR, а также обобщение субъективных оценок обучающихся первого курса всех направлений подготовки Академии спорта в отношении взаимодействия с мобильными платформами и иноязычными цифровыми образовательными ресурсами для самостоятельного совершенствования языковых навыков в неаудиторных условиях. Участниками мероприятий НИРС становились обучающиеся всех ступеней обучения, всех направлений. В рамках УИРС и с точки зрения языкового уровня и работы с цифровыми иноязычными ресурсами обучающиеся первого курса Академии спорта, поскольку нормативный срок изучения дисциплины иностранный язык составляет первый учебный год тех направлений подготовки, представленных в Академии. За исключением направления сервис, нормативный срок обучения составляет 3 семестра, 1,5 года учебных. В рамках НИРС рассматривались вопросы подготовки обучающихся к участию в конференциях различного уровня. Это и ежегодная конференция на иностранных языках, Великолукская государственная академия физической культуры и спорта Knowledge is Power, Вузовская конференция студентов молодых ученых на иностранных языках Science Education Youth уже в городе Великие Луки, и она у нас как раз проходила вчера. Annual International Conference for Students and Young Researchers Modern University Sport Science в городе Москва, в Российском государственном университете физической культуры, спорта, молодежи и туризма, Москва, Гуцулев. А также International INSHS Christmas Sport Scientific Conference в Венгрии, в городе Сомбатхей, в университете Западной Венгрии. С 2017 по 2021 год на основе работы со статистическими данными отчетов по научной работе кафедры иностранных языков Академии спорта наблюдается устойчивый прирост числа участников всех вышеуказанных мероприятий. В 2017 году общее число участников составляло 8 человек, в 2018 – 10, в 2019 – 15. На период вынужденного перехода к дистанционной смешанным формам обучения в 2020 году общее число участников конференции, за исключением конференции в Венгрии, которая отменена была, у нас было 8 человек. В 2021 году, в настоящее время, по итогам уже проведенных межвузовской и конференции с международным участием в городе Великие Луки, в городе Москва, количество участников составило все те же 8 человек. К концу 2021 года мы планируем, что количество участников уже возрастет, потому что нас еще ожидает 2 конференции. Одна на уровне вуза и вторая международная в Венгрии. Тематика проектов НИРС, в данном случае мы имеем в виду доклад и мультимедийную презентацию на его основе, с 2017 по 2021 год в основном раскрывает вопросы, актуальные для будущих специалистов в сфере физической культуры и спорта, адаптивной физической культуры, педагогического образования. Например, характеристики профессиональной терминологии, основополагающие компоненты профессиональной деятельности, достижения спортсменов в любимом виде спорта и так далее. Проектные работы в рамках УИРС, мультимедийные презентации, словари специфических лексических единиц, подборки текстовых материалов также носят профессионально ориентированный характер и осуществляются в соревновательном формате. Группа обучающихся делится на команды и выполняет задания по работе с текстовыми материалами, осуществляется формирование подборок текстовых материалов на скорость. Затем результаты групповой работы обобщаются, систематизируются, анализируются и становятся основой для будущих методических и учебно-методических разработок кафедры иностранных языков Академии спорта. На слайде представлено одно из учебных методических пособий, созданных в результате работы студентов в рамках одного из проектов УИРС по обобщению подборок лексических единиц. Это у нас пособие, которое вышло в прошлом году. А уже на этом слайде представлена электронная версия этого пособия, расширенная. В данном случае наша кафедра готовит онлайн-курс для тех обучающихся, которые имеют право свободного посещения учебных занятий. В данном случае мы имеем в виду членов сборной страны, региональных сборных по разным видам спорта, потому что у них на первом плане, конечно же, тренировочный процесс, но, естественно, мы их активно включаем в образовательную деятельность. Вот таким образом. Проект еще на стадии разработки у нас находится. Согласно результатам, полученным по итогам серии тестовых мероприятий с целью определения уровня владения иностранным языком обучающихся Академии, было установлено, что основная масса обучающихся владеет иностранным языком на уровне А2, что свидетельствует о недостаточном уровне языковой подготовки, полученной во время обучения в школе. И это не соответствует заявленным в образовательных стандартах требованиям к уровню подготовки первокурсников. Данная ситуация, как мы видим, характерна для всего периода проведения исследования. На основе субъективных оценок обучающихся о работе с цифровыми иноязычными ресурсами нами были сделаны следующие выводы. Наиболее популярными в плане совершенствования языковых знаний обучающихся являются такие цифровые образовательные ресурсы, как Duolingo, Drops, Lingualeo. В качестве преимуществ такой работы форма улучшения своих языковых знаний обучающихся подчеркивают доступность изложения материала в этих образовательных ресурсах, гибкий график работы с приложениями, а также возможность систематического повторения и запоминания интересующего их языкового материала. В заключение. Отметим, что для успешного формирования междисциплинарных связей и создания положительного образа будущей профессиональной деятельности обучающихся вузов физической культуры при изучении иностранного языка с применением современных цифровых средств обучения, мы считаем, что в преподавании иностранного языка в неязыковом вузе на данном этапе необходимо соблюдать следующие рекомендации. Во-первых, способствует повышению интереса обучающихся к профессиональному самосовершенствованию за счет вовлечения их в исследовательскую деятельность, связанную с коммуникацией на иностранном языке, участие в конференциях, работа с цифровыми иноязычными ресурсами и так далее. Систематизировать работу обучающихся с профессионально ориентированными иноязычными материалами за счет создания условий для совместного взаимодействия в рамках УИРС по исследованию отдельных аспектов будущей профессиональной деятельности и последующей публикации этих результатов совместной работы в виде учебно-методических пособий, сборников текстовых материалов и так далее. Спасибо большое за внимание. Буду рада ответить на ваши вопросы.
Спасибо большое, Екатерина Викторовна. Есть ли у коллег вопросы? Я пока свой вопрос немножко подожду задавать. Есть ли вопросы у коллег? Пожалуйста. В чате я вопросов пока не вижу. Екатерина Викторовна, скажите, пожалуйста, когда вы говорили об обучении студентов иностранному языку с уровнем А2 поступающих, я так понимаю, что вы имели в виду в первую очередь бакалавров, да, которые обучаются?
Да.
То есть магистратуры, чуть-чуть вот так наклоню, чтобы нас с вами было видно, магистратуры нет в вашем вузе, да?
Магистратура в нашем вузе есть, но мы не рассматривали в исследовании предметно именно магистрантов. В данном случае мы ориентировались на бакалавриат, поскольку сейчас мы находимся на этапе очень активных трансформационных процессов всевозможных, как я уже говорила. Поскольку у нас очень специфический вуз, у нас очень много обучающихся, которых мы практически не видим в офлайн формате. Им очень удобно работать онлайн. Поэтому все эти приложения, все эти цифровые образовательные ресурсы как раз в большей степени им на пользу. И для того, чтобы статистические данные активно собирались и анализировались, именно в рамках вот в этих мы работаем в большей степени с бакалаврами. Их, во-первых, больше, чем магистрантов, ну и, во-вторых, магистрантов, опять же, по статистике и на практике тоже очень редко можно застать, потому что у них там вот активное включение в профессиональную деятельность уже наблюдается, поскольку они продолжают получать образование на более продвинутом, углубленном уровне, и многие из них работают в общеобразовательных учебных заведениях и в спортивных школах, и опять же большая часть их и находится за пределами нашего города, поэтому с ними еще сложнее взаимодействовать.
Мой вопрос еще был связан с тем, что вы упомянули научную работу, а как известно, в стандартах о бакалавриата не всегда прописана, да, научная работа. То есть мы с вами, наверное, можем говорить об элементах научной работы с использованием английского языка, правильно?
Да.
Термин в данном случае.
Просто вот данный термин...
Научная работа.
В данном случае термин научно-исследовательская работа студента – это один из элементов нашего взаимодействия со студентами, знакомства их с научной деятельностью в перспективе. Потому что уже на втором курсе наших студентов очень активно начинают ориентировать на поиск тематики будущего научного исследования. И вот таким образом знакомство наших студентов-бакалавров уже на первом курсе с возможностью провести свое исследование научное, поучаствовать в конференциях. Это прекрасная ситуация, которая им позволяет уже смотреть, а какая сфера им будет интересна. Даже на основе работы с профессиональными терминами, хотя бы минимальное взаимодействие с такой тематикой, им будет вот естественно на пользу. Поэтому НИРС – это действительно неотъемлемая часть нашей работы профессиональной.
Огромное спасибо. Я вынуждена передать слово другому докладчику. Петрова Ирина Витальевна, Национальный исследовательский университет МАИ Москва. Пожалуйста, Ирина Витальевна, если присутствует, будем рады. Будем рады вас послушать. Здравствуйте, презентация.
Да, здравствуйте, да.
Еще раз, да.
Сейчас, одну секунду.
Конечно, конечно.
Добрый день, коллеги.
Наталья Александровна, заведующий кафедрой и модератор, координатор всей конференции, присутствует здесь.
Очень приятно, Ирина Витальевна, кафедра иностранных языков, извините. Естественно, у нас больше всего английского, поэтому мы так привыкли говорить. Национальный исследовательский университет МАИ. Сейчас, одну секунду. Сейчас. Вот теперь все.
Да, все хорошо, все видно.
Все в порядке. Я хотела начать с того, что этой проблемой мы начали, собственно говоря, так как университет у нас все-таки профильный по информационным технологиям. Мы, когда в 2012 году появился в новом федеральном стандарте термин электронное обучение и дистанционное образование, технологии дистанционного образования, мы начали писать статьи и выступать с докладами на конференциях по этой теме. Она близка нам, тем более, что у нас часто университет проводит по этому направлению конференции, но все это было, знаете, так вот теоретически. Мы писали статьи, мы говорили, что это единственная возможность для нас преодолеть те трудности, с которыми мы сталкиваемся в связи с тем, что, во-первых, у нас, естественно, очень разный уровень первокурсников. У нас очень часто выпускники ведущих московских лицеев учатся, и часто приезжают студенты из достаточно удаленных районов страны. И если вот предыдущий оратор говорил о А2, у нас иногда на А1 не вытягивают. А при этом есть те, кто сдал ЕГЭ вот только что на хорошие баллы, там выше 80. И они у нас попадают в одну группу. Мы долго писали о том, что наше единственное спасение – информационные технологии, чтобы создать учебники для тех и для других, но в одни и те же часы можно было с ними заниматься. Но тут, как все знают, произошли события, которые заставили от обсуждения перейти к реальной работе. И, собственно говоря, сейчас, наверное, вот это реальное, то, что произошло, самое важное, потому что, как оказалось, гуманитарные кафедры, мы, естественно, относимся к гуманитарному факультету, справились, может быть, лучше других, потому что если была задача от каждой кафедры, поставлена задача была ректоратом написать 1 электронный курс, мы написали 5 за январь, за каникулы. То есть мы вот собой гордимся в какой-то мере. Собственно говоря, основное, что тут написано, что с 2000-х годов мы начали этим заниматься.
Ирина Петрова где?
Да, не
Вот
поняла.
она. Ирина Петрова, а потом...
Да, значит...
Ирина Петрова, потом Кузнецова, а потом Денекина.
Можно, я извиняюсь, Ирина Витальевна выступает, а все другие выступающих я попрошу послушать микрофона для того, чтобы не прерывать. Извините, Ирина
Витальевна. Значит, мы начинаем... Еще раз, сейчас минутку сбилась. Значит, достаточно неплохо, несмотря на то, что все было неожиданно достаточно, мы считаем, что мы справились, хотя обучаем мы не только разноуровневых студентов, кроме этого мы обучаем еще достаточно разным специальностям, достаточно широкий спектр специальностей у нас от лингвистики, экономики, пиар и таких более гуманитарных направлений до ядерной физики и такого рода специальностей. При этом у нас, естественно, все уровни образования, и мы не можем сказать, что магистров у нас намного меньше. Может быть, у нас меньше аспирантов, но магистров у нас достаточно много. И если... давайте... Сбилась немножко сейчас. Значит, то, что необходимо было, мы поняли, значит, используем мы, естественно,
вода уже холодная.
Широкий спектр информационных технологий. Среди них, естественно, электронные учебники, которые достаточно давно библиотека имеет все учебники в электронном виде. Кроме этого, достаточно много тестов уже сделано. Электронные образовательные ресурсы мы начали использовать, естественно, начали в первые дни карантина со скайпа, потом университет установил WebEx, который несколько более удобен, и затем мы начали вот в степике делать эти программы. Я покажу сейчас пример того курса, который сделан для бакалавров. Я не знаю, возможно, есть те, кто знаком с этим курсом, он достаточно удобен. Есть там возможность прокторинга, но у него одна большая проблема, он достаточно дорог. Университету на то количество курсов, которые нам нужны, в общем, видимо, университет не справляется финансово, хотя очень удобно, мы получаем в электронном виде ответы студентов, в общем-то, студент может работать в любое удобное время. Сейчас это сохранили для тех, кто по каким-то причинам не может приехать в университет. То есть мы сейчас работаем и дистанционно, и очно. И вот дистанционные студенты – это бакалаврский курс, отдельно несколько курсов для магистрантов у нас сделаны и для аспирантов. Естественно, с бакалаврами больше всего проблем, потому что бакалавры менее заинтересованы обычно, особенно на первом курсе в обучении английскому языку. Хотя у нас есть отдельно группы, так называемый эталон, которые занимаются по ускоренной программе, повышенный уровень у них с использованием достаточно большого количества зарубежных учебников, и выходят они на сдачу экзамена после окончания бакалавриата. Но с бакалаврами еще, конечно, проблема заинтересованности и проблема того, что они тоже айтишники, и они иногда опережают нас. То есть проблема проверки существует, потому что, естественно, технологии наши не очень успевают за их возможностями с нами бороться. Поэтому, в общем-то, первое контрольное мероприятие по степику показывает уровень знаний где-то порядка 60%, качества, извините, а последние порядка 90%. Не потому, что они выучили это все, а потому, что они научились справляться с программой. Это то, что касается бакалавров. Да, тут проблемы есть такого плана. Видимо, надо расширять эту программу. Хотя у нас тоже, в чем наше преимущество было, что институт дистанционного образования у нас был раньше. Мы использовали Прометей, он достаточно слабенький, программа не настолько имеет хорошие возможности, но мы ее широко использовали. Вот степик нам сейчас больше понравился, но, видимо, нам приходится сейчас все это переделывать. Преподаватели кафедры справляются, что радует. Переходим мы все-таки в Moodle, потому что степик дорог для университета, несмотря на все свои преимущества. Магистры обычно более заинтересованы. У нас, к сожалению, с магистрами проблем тоже много, потому что у нас есть магистры, которые продолжают обучение, И есть те, кто по целевым направлениям от предприятий к нам приходят заниматься, когда им уже иногда далеко за 40. То есть когда человек по карьерным каким-то своим основаниям должен получить магистерский диплом, а с английским языком у него за это время встреч не было. И тут у нас тоже пришлось нам использовать те же самые ресурсы Степика, ну, сначала Webex, потом Степика. С магистрами легче, они меньше. То есть они делятся на две группы по степени вовлеченности. Одни хотят узнать, другие хотят получить зачет. И в этом смысле, видимо, использование, да, это уже не дала. Магистерский пример не привела. Там тоже еще такая у нас сходит проблема, что очень много направлений. И если бакалавров мы учим одной и той же технической лексики, мы не делим по лексическим задачам бакалаврские учебники, то магистры по каждому направлению имеют свой учебник и свою программу. Работа колоссальная предстоит, несмотря на то, что мы давно начали этим заниматься. Кроме этого, хотелось бы научить пользоваться вот с этого уровня, начиная электронными переводчиками, потому что когда начинают использовать машинный перевод, естественно, возникают большие проблемы. И вот это владение машинным переводом мы считаем одной из задач обучения магистрантов, потому что ну, это может требоваться в профессиональной деятельности их.
Хорошо. Ирина Витальевна, я извиняюсь, у вас буквально пару минут.
Да, я только про аспирантов и все. Значит, с аспирантами все гораздо легче, им надо сдать кандидатский экзамен, поэтому они заинтересованы в том, чтобы сдать. Поэтому тот же самый онлайн-курс они проходят с удовольствием, учатся техническому переводу, и в этом смысле вот курс был просто очень полезен для нас. Что касается проблем, как у всех, недостаточная наша квалификация, недостаток с точки зрения создания электронных образовательных ресурсов. С другой стороны, у нас преимущество, что мы всегда можем обратиться к коллегам с профилирующих кафедр, но, тем не менее, нам часто не хватает знаний, и мы стараемся. Ну и, как показал опыт, все-таки мы справляемся после года такой работы, мы можем сказать, что все-таки мы более-менее справились и надеемся, что дальше будет лучше. Спасибо, все, что хотела.
Спасибо большое, Ирина Витальевна. Мы тоже надеемся, что дальше будет лучше, что люди будут здоровы, будут нормально, в нормальном режиме работать, реализовывать свои планы. Мне очень было приятно услышать, что вот наш вуз, Стамбульский госуниверситет, идет как бы с моей в ногу в плане выбора содержания для обучения бакалавров иностранному языку. В ВУЗе тоже решили в этом году, что для бакалавров будет учебник единого содержания, а уже на более продвинутых у магистров и аспирантов будут разные учебники. Это здорово. Но вот про машинный перевод вы такую идею хорошую подкинули, надо будет подумать.
Вот подумайте, потому что
Да.
они должны уметь это делать.
Конечно. Но все-таки, мне кажется, вы говорили две разные группы студентов. Одни, которые хотят иностранный язык изучать, а вторые, которые зачет получить. Они все хотят, но просто у них мотивация.
Нет, те тоже хотят зачет, конечно. Я не говорю, что те не хотят, да, все хотят.
Спасибо. Спасибо, коллеги. Будут ли еще к Ирине Витальевне вопросы? Если нет, благодарим Ирину Витальевну. Если
Спасибо.
есть докладчики Кузнецова Наталья Владимировна, Деныкина Екатерина Владимировна, прошу подключиться, включить микрофон. Да, здравствуйте. Ага. Итак, Деныкина Екатерина Владимировна и Кузнецова Наталья Владимировна. Есть ли такие? Нет, тогда Тапурия Валентина Федоровна, я прошу включить вас микрофон. Да, правильно я вижу, Валентина Федоровна? Валентина Федоровна, здравствуйте, это вас я вижу на экране, правильно? Пожалуйста, включите звук. Да, должно быть вас слышно. Угу. Валентина Федоровна, да? Итак, тема вашего доклада – методические рекомендации по организации работы с образовательным веб-квестом по иностранному языку. Очень приятно. Валентина Федоровна, пожалуйста, запускайте свою презентацию. Включить звук. Нажмите, пожалуйста, на экране «Включить звук». Есть у вас такое? Включить звук. Вот, теперь должно быть вас слышно. Отлично. Вы нас слышите? Пожалуйста, ждем вашего выступления. Можете начинать. Так, преподаватель иностранного английского языка, СОЖ номер 276Б, Санкт-Петербург.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, I would like to tell you my report on methodological recommendations on work organization with educational web quest in foreign language. My name is Valentina Fedorovna Tapuria. I'm a school English teacher in St. Petersburg. Well, the first thing that I would like to mention about, my article is described in the the high-level didactic capacity of modern pedagogical technologies of training, and is justified the actuality of the using in the process of teaching foreign language. The appropriateness of information technology applying has been lit up at the educational institution. The methods of teaching educational web quest is represented phasing and algorithm process at the foreign language lesson. The example is given on the basis of drawn-up web quest on the topic American astronauts and Russian cosmonauts. В настоящее время стремительная информатизация мирового сообщества и России, в частности, создает благоприятные предпосылки для освоения широким спектром составляющих образовательного процесса нового пространства, интернет-пространства. Постепенно вступает в интернет-пространство и информационная методическая среда школы, СПО, вуза, понятие относительно новое для российской методической науки. Современная методика преподавания английского языка изобилует разнообразными средствами и возможностями для создания мотивации учащихся. Однако, к сожалению, не все школьники с успехом овладевают тем необходимым минимумом, обозначенным требованиями современной школы. Учитель английского языка сегодня не ограничивается материалами учебника и пытается наполнить образовательный процесс новым красочным материалом, способным повысить интерес школьника, создать ситуацию общения, мотивировать учащегося на изучение новых грамматических конструкций, лексических единиц и создание ситуации. Мы живем в довольно быстро меняющемся мире с его сложностью, непредсказуемостью, невозможностью что-либо прогнозировать. Основным вызовом времени для всех сегментов жизнедеятельности человека, в том числе для сферы образования, стала ситуация пандемии на фоне информационного давления, инноваций, кризисов и цифровой революции, движения валютного курса. Все участники образовательного процесса, обучающиеся и обучающие, сейчас испытывают стресс, проявляющийся физиологическим и эмоциональным возбуждением, паникой, беспокойством, тревогой, а это приводит все к эмоциональному выгоранию. В силу этого все педагогическое сообщество находится в поиске наиболее эргономичной технологии для успешного продолжения образовательного процесса в учебных заведениях. Систематическое использование современных педагогических технологий в образовательных учреждениях, школа, СПО, ВУЗ создает благоприятные условия для погружения в аутентичную языковую среду. Все обучающиеся могут использовать информационные сети интернет, создавать авторские ресурсы, а также общаться с сверстниками из других стран. Они обладают высоким учебно-дидактическим потенциалом, что позволяет, первое, индивидуализировать процесс обучения иностранным языком. Второй момент, использовать индивидуальную, парную и групповую форму работы на уроке, то есть делает процесс изучения иностранного языка более интерактивным и приближенным к ситуации реального общения. Третий момент. Формировать ключевые компетенции и определенные виды универсальных учебных действий, то есть учебных умений. Достигать запланированные личностные, метапредметные, предметные результаты обучения по предмету и по дисциплине. Пятый момент, который очень важный, это реализовывать требования, выдвигаемые новым в ГОС. Особого внимания заслуживает технология на основе эффективности управления и организации учебного процесса, к которым относятся новые информационные компьютерные технологии. В этом плане целесообразность использования информационных технологий включает важные и главные методы направления. Первое направление – информатизация языкового образования. Второе – технологизация учебного процесса. Третье – возможность интенсифицировать и индивидуализировать процесс обучения иностранного языка. Четвертый момент – развитие универсальных учебных действий, творческих и проектных способностей обучающихся. И пятый – перераспределение ролей субъектов учебно-воспитательного процесса. Какие же материалы и методы мы будем использовать для достижения данных целей? Несмотря на большое количество работ, посвященных проблеме внедрения информационных, в том числе интернет-технологий, в процесс преподавания иностранного языка, в образовательном учреждении педагоги продолжают прибегать к использованию традиционных средств обучения. На мой взгляд, основными причинами игнорирования современных педагогических технологий являются недостаточное количество уроков в неделю, плохое техническое обеспечение образовательного учреждения, низкий уровень сформированности информационных компетенций субъектов образования, отсутствие методики работы, которые могли бы быть реально использованы в российских школах, техникумах или колледжах или университетах. Веб-квест является самым сложным учебным интернет-ресурсом, объединяющим в себе компоненты других интернет-ресурсов, и целью которого является проведение электронного или онлайн-проекта. Это проблемное задание Problem Solving Task с элементами ролевой игры, для выполнения которого используются информационные ресурсы сети интернет. Этот метод обучения и контроля знаний, умений и навыков, отвечающих современным требованиям и особенностям образовательной среды, был разработан в 1995 году профессорами Государственного университета Сан-Диего Берни Доджем и Томом Марчем. Этот новый метод быстро завоевал популярность как среди американских педагогов, так и европейских. А с конца 90-х годов 20 века 20-го столетия стал распространяться в России. При работе над разработкой и выполнением задания образовательного веб-квеста необходимо соблюдать определенную этапность работы. Алгоритм работы с образовательным веб-квестом имеет свой пошаговый план. Первое, что это подготовка, шаг первый, подготовка, выбор темы, которая соответствует интересам обучающимся. Шаг второй. Введение, описание, объяснение темы, формулировка задания, обсуждение предполагаемого результата работы над проектом. Третий шаг – процесс распределения и закрепления ролей, работа со списком веб-сайтов, создание своего собственного хот-листа, отбор необходимого текстового и мультимедийного материала, оформление работы, подготовка к выступлению и защите проекта, презентация проектной работы или публикация результатов исследования в сети интернет. Шаг 4. Оценка. Нужно оценить. Оценивание результатов работы по критериям. 5-й шаг. Подведение итогов выполнения заданий, анализ результатов и рефлексия деятельности. Приведем пример образовательного веб-квеста по теме Inventions that shook the world на базе УМК English 10-11 by Владимир Петрович Кузовлев and his teachers. На протяжении 2 уроков запланирована проектная деятельность по теме American Astronauts and Russian Cosmonauts. Title of the unit Inventions that shook the world. Title of the lesson American Astronauts and Russian Cosmonauts. Type of web quest, retelling, creative work, task. Introduction. The people always dreamt about space traveling and flying to different stars. In the 20th century, this dream came true. First men in space were from the USSR and America. They became national heroes and true examples to follow. The internet will give us an opportunity to discover the history of space exploration by the USSR and the USA. The result of your group work will be 2 websites about American astronauts and Russian cosmonauts task. The class will be divided into 2 groups. In the first, we'll present the information about American astronauts and the second about Russian cosmonauts. As a result of common work of 2 groups will be the website. Don't forget to, number 1, use hot list. Number 2, add the most important facts according to the topic. Number 3, add different graphs, photos, pictures, and so on. Number 4, respect the united style. Number 5, respect the limits established for the length. 18th, 20th centuries sentences are possible to be written and no more. Process. Step 1. Divide the task between the members of your group. After getting the aspect to present, find the necessary websites according to your group. Make a list of websites which can help you to do the task. Choose the most famous cosmonauts and fill the table. A. Name. B. Date of birth. C. Place of birth. D. Profession. E. Achievements. F. Interesting facts. Step 2. Make the Word document and copy the necessary information. Respect the limits established for this length. Write the title. The information should be presented logically. Download some graphs to illustrate the information. Step 3. When you have found enough information, get together and make your own wallpaper. It needs to be interesting. Write the title. Check your text according to the criteria. Prepare your report in groups. Step 4. Use the website to create your own internet page. Post the information. Don't forget to add graphical elements and to sign up. Check the information. Step 5. Put marks to each other using the following criteria. And conclusion. Congratulations, you have completed the task. Are you happy with the results of your group? And at the last, conclusion. Таким образом, использование информационных технологий, основанных на выполнении поисковых и проблемных заданий, способствует формированию ключевых компетенций, достижению запланированных стандартом результатов обучения и развитию универсальных учебных действий. Образовательный веб-квест является альтернативой проектной деятельности для реализации творческого потенциала индивидуальных образовательных запросов на занятиях по иностранному языку. Интернет-сайт постоянно развивается, совершенствуя формирование единой информационно-методической среды в российском интернет-пространстве. При кажущемся преобладании информативной функции сайтов внутри единой информационно-методической среды интернет-пространства важнейшей функцией является развитие умения ориентироваться в современном информационном пространстве, владеть комплексом информационных технологий, осуществлять грамотный поиск информации и строить на этой основе необходимую аналитическую базу. Thank you very much. Спасибо.
Спасибо вам, Валентина Федоровна. Коллеги, есть ли у кого вопросы по поводу веб-квестов и их использования на уроках английского языка? Если есть, пожалуйста, подключайтесь. Есть ли еще у нас выступающие Бондарева Татьяна Эдвардовна, Кузнецова Наталья Владимировна, Динейкина Екатерина Владимировна? Не подключается. Разрешите тогда поделиться собственной информацией по использованию, секунду. Ой, да. Секунду. Нет.
Спасибо большое. Спасибо вам.
Подключаюсь, пробую. Да что ж такое-то? Не надо. Всё. Я надеюсь, видно?
Видно, видно. Я просто сейчас вас, как бы, ваше изображение потеряла,
Да, краткая презентация об использовании ресурсов интернет в курсе общего английского языка. Видна демонстрация, да?
Нет, я не вижу.
Не видно демонстрацию. Хорошо, сейчас.
Не вижу, у меня ее нет.
Да нет, демонстрация видна, она идет.
Куда-то она... Так,
нет,
демонстрация экрана куда-то ушла. Вы не можете включить, поскольку демонстрацию экрана осуществляет другой участник, мне говорят.
F5. Нет, F5, вот. Другим участникам видно. Ну, давайте я назову, потому что время ограничено.
Да, конечно. Да.
Значит, на первом слайде представлен тот электронный ресурс, который используется при обучении студентов первого курса. Я, извиняюсь, не с того начала, с электронной презентации. Я представляю Тамбовский государственный университет, факультет филологии, кафедру зарубежной филологии и прикладной лингвистики. В данной одна из преподаваемых дисциплин – это иностранный язык для студентов-переводчиков первого курса по направлению лингвистика. Но помимо существующих российских учебников, стремление дать аутентичный текст нас привело к тому, что мы используем различные онлайн-ресурсы, в частности, Learn English British Council. Вот этот ресурс, вы видите интерфейс вот этого ресурса, он достаточно простой, значит, онлайн-курсы платные, skills, grammar, vocabulary.
Извините, пожалуйста, не видим.
Не видите.
Только ваша
работа. Да, куда-то как бы все потерялось.
Нет, мы видим ваш диск.
Я медленно назову, пока идет техника. learnenglish.britishcouncil.org. То есть это сайт британского совета Learn English. И в нем есть несколько секций, которые можно использовать в бесплатном доступе для студентов. Чем хороши? Тем, что они разноуровневые, от А1, А2 до Б1, Б2 предельно. Значит, делится зеленый экран, такой вы можете увидеть, если войдете Learn English в одно слово, .britishcouncil.org. Skills, Grammar, Vocabulary, Business English, General English и IELTS, да, вот раздел этого экзамена. Значит, бесплатно я, в частности, как преподаватель, использую разделы Skills, Listening, Reading, Writing, Speaking, фрагментарно, не на каждом занятии, но еженедельно, примерно у меня это бывает, раз в 10 дней. Grammar, Beginner to Pre-Intermediate, Intermediate to Upper Intermediate для разных студентов, потому что группы тоже с разным уровнем, как сегодня говорили. Vocabulary и General English. Audio Zone, Video Zone, Magazine. Мы используем Audio Zone, Video Zone. Итак, что у нас сейчас идет? Да. Компьютерный гений говорят, что не видно демонстрацию. Не видно ее. Как ее сделать? Видно? Да, коллеги, сейчас видно? Не видно. Новая демонстрация. Не знаю.
Видно.
Видно? Видно.
Да, видно.
Теперь видно, да.
Теперь мне, извиняюсь, да. Итак, значит, пример. Work-life balance, я взяла B1 listening, значит, preparation, там несколько, вот в каждом из skills, в каждом из подразделов, если skills нажимаете, дальше выскакивает подраздел, в частности, work-life balance – это одна из наших тем. И вот в этой теме, значит, аудирование поделено на несколько занятий, на несколько стадий задания. Preparation, ну, 8 items remaining, значит, matching task, совместить best-selling book, что это такое, да, and advantage и так далее. Это до прослушивания задания. Чем хорош ресурс? Тем, что все задания интерактивные, то есть студенты выбирают, я не вывела на экран, но если вы его включите, этот ресурс, очевидно, там рука такая есть, значит, выбирают они нужный ответ, и после есть фидбэк, то есть можно увидеть, правильно или неправильно ответил, и в чем заключается ошибка. Следующее, первое задание, послушайте и выберите правильный ответ. Вот вам пример вопросов и ответов, которые это задание содержит. How popular is Chris Stevenson's book? Not very popular, it's new, people don't know it yet. И дальше они переходят к следующему вопросу. Если это первый вопрос, то нажимают на next question, если на все ответили finish. Временной промежуток они выбирают сами, поэтому преподавателю и ребятам удобно. Можно это дома делать, можно это на занятии, это как вам понравится. Значит, к чему я пришла? Результат выполнения задания. Аудирование, как правило, проходит хуже. Средний процент примерно 78. С чем столкнулась? С какими трудностями? Во-первых, это невнимание к деталям. Чтобы ответить на вопрос often или very often, да, надо услышать какое-то ключевое слово, которое они в момент прослушивания пропустили. Отсюда ошибка. Фонематические и лексические ошибки составляют большую часть. Да, can clearly separate вызвала трудность. Are free to focus on, to access your work in the evenings и так далее. Трудности воспроизведения логики изложения. Но я бы связала это тоже с оперативной памятью и с вниманием в данном случае при прослушивании. Значит, когда надо написать, что появлялось, в каком порядке появлялись, да, утверждения, не все студенты могли расставить их правильно. Какие дополнительные задания использовала? Скрипт. Вот хоть и говорят, что это такая опора очевидная, что значит, явно легко, тем не менее нашим студентам помогло, лингвистические трудности некоторые были сняты, кто-то читал вслух, кто-то про себя в зависимости от группы. Работа в парах для проверки понимания, то есть не со мной во время прослушивания, и подготовка к ответам устным, которые идут после прослушивания. Так, это была секция listening, уровень B1. Следующее, грамматические навыки. Я на том же уровне пока остаюсь, B1, чтобы сравнить результаты. Взяла тему I wish if only, subjunctive, conditionals. Трудная тема, как ни странно. Что мне понравилось в задании? Есть четкая grammar explanation, очень короткая, вот такой, какой вы видите на экране. Понятная. Только вот одна студентка из двух групп сказала, что мне это ни о чем не говорит. Ну, это говорит об ее уровне владения языком. Да? Значит, хорошее объяснение. Вот вы видите на экране. И дальше студенты должны выполнить два теста. Тест 1, тест 2, каждый по 8 пунктов. И там видно на экране. Опять же в интерактивном формате. То есть вопрос, 3 варианта ответа, выбирают, идут дальше. Next question буквально, ну я не знаю, там 3-5 минут на тест они тратят, потом возвращаются. Вот какие результаты. Возвращаются к тому, что им надо прояснить, если были какие-то вопросы. То есть фидбэк. Средний процент выполнения в грамматике уже приблизительно 82, поскольку текст короткий, вот такой высокий процент, тест короткий. Где-то 1 или 2 ошибки в каждом тесте студенты делали. С какими трудностями мы столкнулись? Неправильный выбор формы, невнимательно к контексту. Или не понял правила, о чем я говорила. Ну вот взяла пример, вот в этом ошибались. I wish I go to work tomorrow, да? Правильный didn't have. А поскольку только объясняла I wish somebody would и wouldn't, очень многие студенты выбрали wouldn't have to, ну просто потому что это запомнили. Вспомогательные дополнительные задания. Мы быстро анализировали их ошибки, там, где это надо было, с теми, кто не понял. И большинство студентов все-таки прибегли к самоанализу ошибок. Лексические навыки. Вы видите, какую красивую картинку представляет этот сайт, скрин с экрана. Да? Выбрала vegetables вам как пример. Значит, вот эти вот рука, да, radish, green beans и так далее, должны студенты совместить название и картинку, как pictorial dictionary. Что хорошо, то, что там транскрипция есть. И если студент на занятии в наушниках, они еще прослушивают транскрипцию. Значит, это не весь, не полный список. Вы видите, что здесь около 10, там 12 на скидку наименований, все они в цвете. Значит, сначала работают самостоятельно. Дальше идут 4 задания. Первое. Разместите слова в алфавитном порядке. Второе. Спеллинг. Перемешанные буквы. Разместите буквы в нужном порядке. Третье задание названо descriptions. Write the words and complete the sentence. Пример. We eat the leaves of. И дальше вот идет предложение. Они должны выбрать, какие овощи изученные на этой страничке сюда подходят. Which vegetable? Multiple choice task. Which 3 vegetables grow below ground? Broccoli, sour, courgette, garlic and ginger. И за этим тоже они выбирают и возвращаются к ответам после ответа на все вопросы. Ну и последнее обсуждение. Это устное, это уже никакого выбора не предусматривает, это мы делаем в классе. Результат выполнения заданий высокий, соотносимый с грамматикой, количество ошибок примерно такой же, радует, что большое количество правильных ответов. И здесь я считаю, что большое значение играет все-таки визуальная опора, когда ребята не ошибаются, ну, трудно ошибиться. Значит, типичные трудности, что такое касава, да, ну, незнание реалий и фонетические ошибки возникают также, несмотря на то, что есть транскрипция. Вот это вот мне было очень обидно, значит, пришлось вернуться опять и сфокусировать их внимание на фонетических значках. Значит, студенты отмечали несоответствие выбора некоторых заданий, когда они выполняли задания по лексике. Ну, например, алфавитный порядок, поставьте слова. Вот. Или говорение, какие фрукты или там овощи употребляются или нет. А уровень B1, B2, они сами назвали эти задания очень легкими. Если аудирование, вот по поводу заданий для аудирования комментариев не было, то здесь такие возникли. Ну и что же, какие выводы я сделала? Что полезен в качестве дополнительного материала для тренировки языкового материала, а также речевых навыков и умений. Рассчитан на взрослую аудиторию, не на малышей. Содержит современные аутентичные материалы, и при использовании разделов видео, аудио на уровне B2 сложность значительно возрастает. Если вы откроете, посмотрите, мы использовали ресурс видео, паприка, lentils, да, с паприкой, значит, это оладьи с паприкой из чечевицы. Текст показался сложным. Спасибо вам большое за внимание. Просто я вас еще раз хотела сориентировать, вот, может быть, сейчас видно на экране ссылку на этот ресурс. Вот как он выглядит. Если вам будет полезно, я буду очень рада. Если возникли вопросы, пожалуйста, слушаем, как мне вернуть назад всех участников. И мы с вами должны заканчивать, к сожалению. Если есть вопросы, очень быстро отвечу. Коллеги, не слышу. В чате 2 вопроса. 2 вопроса. Ага, не видно, видно. Все. Большое вам спасибо. Большое спасибо участникам, всем, кто нашел время, принял участие в конференции. Ждем вас в Тамбове. Всем здоровья, профессиональных успехов. Ну, всего самого доброго. До свидания, прощаем.
Спасибо большое. Всего доброго. До свидания.
Всего доброго. Завершаем конференцию. Так. Да где же они?